Kim Hollers. Kim.
Sorry, you were stuck. Present Kalamazoo.
Bobby Hopewell.
President, Kalamazoo County.
Brenda Hughes. Sakia Lee.
Present in Kalamazoo.
Carol McGlynn.
Present in Kalamazoo.
John Oliver.
Present, Kalamazoo.
Jonathan Pulley.
Present, Calhoun County.
Alyssa Stewart.
Present in Kalamazoo County.
Dr. Cooney, could you give us your location?
Okay, yes, I am in Kalamazoo.
All right,
And I'm in Kalamazoo as well.
thank you. All right, thank you very much. We have the minutes from our last meeting. Are there any changes to the minute? Hearing none, I would welcome a motion.
So moved.
Supported.
Okay, moved by McGlynn, and I think it was supported by Lee, if I'm not mistaken. Any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carried. You have the agenda before you for today. Are there any changes to the agenda? Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, we'll accept the agenda as is. All right, we are at reports of officers, boards, and committees. Mr. Coordinator, anything coming out of that?
No, not at this time.
All right, we're at new business number 6. The floor is yours, Mr. Ford.
All right, we had a request from organizer committee member Damaro to have an overview of the child care landscape in Kalamazoo. Mr. Damaro does some work in Battle Creek, is familiar with what's going on there. He also, his thing is workforce development. So understanding the critical role that child care and access to it plays a part in folks accessing good jobs. Just wanted to hear more about the child care landscape in Kalamazoo. And to help us with that, we have some excellent guests who will be presenting about that issue. So first, April Goodwin from Southwest Child Care Resources, Executive Director, will be presenting. I think she'll be teaming up with Kristen Buell-Lepisto, Executive Director of Kalamazoo County Ready Fours. They'll be going first. And then Michael Evans, Executive Director of Kalamazoo Literacy Council, will be presenting with Nicole Bloom from the YWCA, Program Manager there. And so April and Kristen have kind of a larger view, if you will. I know Southwest Child Care Resources is multi-county. Kalamazoo County Ready Fours, obviously Kalamazoo County. And then Michael and Nicole have kind of really like a neighborhood focus. So they can give us some insight on what they're hearing there at the neighborhood level. And so without further ado, I'll let April and Kristen start us off.
Can I just add one more comment, Kevin? You
Yes.
did a great job summarizing, but just so the group knows, I just feel like it's critical that we solve the early childhood and childcare space for a full economic recovery. Obviously, women were significantly impacted by the pandemic. The state of Michigan lost over 130,000 women out of the workforce over the past 18 months. And I feel like, unless we solve this issue, this can have a multiplier effect on every other sector, manufacturing, healthcare, service industry. So I just think it's very important that we understand what's happening in the community and that we're supporting our early childhood providers. So thank you, Kevin.
Ms. Lee, I see you have something. Also, I'm going to have you folks, if I don't say your name, when I call you out, make sure you say your name when you're speaking, when you start speaking, so folks know who's out there. Sakia Lee?
Thank you. So, and I know we need to get the presentation started, and I'm so happy to see all of these amazing folks in this space. And Ben, I know you know I'm gonna say this, while we have the child care providers and expertise here today, I just also still, the question remains, what are employers doing to help support families with this being such a big issue? So I appreciate us doing the landscape today. Can't wait to hear about new developments from everyone that's gonna present, but I'm also wondering if we can circle back after we get this information and see what employers are willing or can do. And for the presenters, if there's anything that you know of that we don't, if employers are matching any type of dollars, or if you've heard about any on-site childcare, I think in order for us to really solve the problem, it's going to take more than just the folks that have the expertise in the area.
Wonderful. Is it okay if I share my screen, Kevin?
Yes, I think IT can help with that.
I think I can just do it as long as that's
Oh, there you
okay
go.
with you all. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to kick us off if that's okay with everybody, although I can't imagine a better setup and an intro than what you all just said. It sounds like we're speaking to our people here. So really happy to be here today. Like Kevin said, I'm Kristen Buell-Lepisto, Executive Director of Kalamazoo County Ready Fours. And April and I are going to start off with a higher level sort of state of childcare and preschool in our community. And then I know Michael and Nicole are going to tag on to what we're saying as well. So feel free to jump in at any time, but we will have time at the end for questions. And like I said, I know that this group already understands this. Certainly the pandemic has really brought forward the importance of early childhood education and childcare in our community, and literally all of the effects of when that's not in place, right? Like Sakia was just saying, early childhood education really is a solution that creates upward mobility for all children in a community. And we're going to start off, April and I are just going to talk quickly about the benefits of putting investment dollars and sort of awareness there. And then we'll talk about how our two organizations support the sector and offer any chance for questions after that as well. So really, I know this group is focused on 2-generation effects, and Ben could probably give this presentation, certainly. Actually, Tim Bardick and I were with Kevin Ford earlier last week talking about this on the Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo podcast. So more to come on this, but really when you look at childcare and high quality early education, there are two gen effects that are increased future earnings. So this is the long-term investment side, right, of the children that are in high quality early education. As they say, skills beget skills, right? So what kiddos are learning early on compounds itself as they go through their education career. The latest estimate is for every dollar invested, it increases the children's future earnings by $2. And then there's also the parents, right, who are affected. So we know that parents who have, high quality care, there are higher participation in the workforce. So latest estimates are that the effect is about 20%. So meaning 1 in 5 parents, particularly working mothers, 1 in 5 mothers who have access to high quality care enter the workforce. So obviously this has huge effects on our economy. But it doesn't stop there. So this is just sort of a high level snapshot of some of the things that are affected in terms of high quality early childhood education in our community. Kindergarten entrance rates, graduation rates, adult earnings, college enrollment, and then there's things like decreases in crime, special education costs, there's better health outcomes. Really, folks in the field say you can pay now or you can pay more later, right? And it's been really shown in latest estimates, a lot of economists have looked at this over the last few decades, to be the highest return on investment for a public initiative. And so zooming in, when you look at Michigan, we wanted to give you sort of a state of the sector when we look at our state. This is out of some data that was released last week, actually, through NACI, and then there was also a New York Times article about this, as well as, I believe, the Washington Post. There's about almost 90% of childcare centers in Michigan are experiencing a staffing shortage. Certainly anyone who has young children or knows people who have young children can tell you this anecdotally. There is just a huge staffing shortage, which is meaning that there are less classrooms open. Even though there are wait lists, there are reduced hours, all sorts of impacts of that. And I would say that these numbers are on par with what we're hearing in our local community. Certainly that 25% unable to open classrooms or having reduced hours, I would say locally what we're hearing is anecdotally that's much higher. So most of the centers that we partner with are in that position where despite having a wait list, they cannot open more classrooms because there is no one to staff them. They simply cannot find enough qualified teachers. One of the big reasons for that is pay. So 98% of occupations pay more than the childcare and early childhood education sector. And that is particularly acute right now as other industries are also offering sign-on bonuses or increasing their hourly wages for their needs to find positions as well. So it has a trickle effect to the early education sector. Again, Michigan is acutely bad right now in feeling this stress. And that is because when you look at how, when economists analyze this, they look at the ratio of pre-K teacher salary versus kindergarten salary. It's sort of a common way that they're looking at the salaries of early educators. Michigan is second to last in the country. So our ratio is at 59% versus the 88% average in the country. We're slightly ahead of Alabama. So we're not just behind states like California and New York, we are behind everybody. So it is a particularly felt problem right now in Michigan. And I'm going to turn it over to April to talk quickly about her organization, and then I'll get back to Casey Ready For Us as well.
Thank you, Krista. I'm glad to be here to share about childcare resources and referral. One of the things I want to just quickly kind of go over about what childcare resources and referral does. First thing, we are 8 counties strong. So we cover about 899 providers within these 8 counties. We work with all the providers, providing them the access to support. We work with centers and family and group homes. We support them in with trainings. We support them with the Great Start to Quality STAR platform, where we work with them on integrating various trainings, various areas within that. We work with my registry professional development to provide these trainings, which are trainings across the state. There are actually 9 other resource centers in the state of Michigan. We are one of them that covers the southwest portion of it. We work with the family engagement, where we work with parents to help them find childcare within the state of Michigan or in our region. So families can call us and ask us about when they're in need of childcare. They can call and they can say, well, I work here in this county, or I work in this neighborhood, and I'm looking for childcare in this neighborhood. We have access to be able to look up where the different childcare providers are and be able to give them. So what we do is call childcare providers to ask them if they have any openings, what kind of costs, what kind of things they want. We work with DHS, so if they have subsidy payments, we can also help with parents with that to give them the different childcare programs that could be available to them. We work with them on infant and toddler by providing a focus group where we actually work with groups of infant and toddler teachers to help them with various topics, to do some one-on-one coaching with them. We work with exempt license providers, where we do orientations, where we implement some continuous quality improvement for license exempt. And those are our grandparents, our aunts and uncles that are working with childcare and get the subsidy, DHS DHS subsidies so that we can help them with the different safety trainings, health and safety trainings, get them CPR for their homes. Another area that we work with is training them in the CDA. And one of the things that's really unique about ours is that we're the first in the Michigan to offer a multi-employer, multi-county program where we offer an apprenticeship that we are able to take the providers through. They work on getting their CDA, credentialing, and then we also be able to work with them getting an apprenticeship, which also works with working them into various different talent pipelines, childhood education. We work with KCC, Kellogg Community College, to offer them, if they complete our CDA and apprenticeship program, KCC will offer them 9 credits towards their early childhood associate degree. We also work with Southwest Michigan College, where they will also offer the same type of credits towards their early childhood education. So this is another great time to bring them all the way through this pipeline to get them to the point where hopefully we even get them into going into maybe higher education, getting them into that. The workforce development, we work with Michigan Works, we work with various different agencies. So we're encompassing all these different areas to help our child care providers become high quality and work with them to feel comfortable in providing this for our children and for our families. You can go to our next. One of the things that we do is we work with the Early Childhood Network, which is through the state of Michigan. Approximately half of our providers are participate in the Great Start to Quality. And that is a grading system that improves the improvement system. Hopefully that's going to stop. There we go. Sorry about that. GSQ uses 40 program quality indicators to measure what the early child program across 5 categories. So when they become part of the rating system for the state of Michigan, we look at staff qualifications, administrative management, environment, curriculum, and family and community partnership. So these different indicators help us to see exactly where we need to work with them to help them become even more of a high quality programming. Through this program, we look at the different stars that the state has done. A lot of people, when they look at this, they want to look at this as a hotel star rating, which is not. So we look at, like, if you're a 1-star, your program meets maybe 1 or 2 of these different areas. Same with the 2-star. But as you get higher, you're meeting more and more of these 5 different programs, categories over on the side. So what we see is a lot of our centers are 4 and 5. Great Start, Great Start and Head Start. Both are our 4 and 5-star. A lot of our 4 and star, our different centers are our 4 and 5 stars. Our family homes are more of our 2 and 3 because a lot of them can't afford the big curriculum that's out there, the cost of that big curriculum. They don't have all the education, bachelor degrees, so that they can move up into that 4 and 5-star. So we work with them to be able to increase these stars and make their program even more successful, or even looking better to some of our families that are out there searching for child care providers. You can go to the next one. Okay, here's a kind of an overview of what Kalamazoo County providers look like. So there are, in Kalamazoo County alone, there's 275 providers. 150 of them are child care centers, 125 are family and group providers. Family and group providers are 12 and under, have that many children in their program. So like our families have up to 6, groups can have up to 12. Kalamazoo City, under these zip codes, there are 163 providers. When I looked at, I thought we broke down the north side, you can see where we have a little bit of a area that we need to work with. And those, we only have 22, and that's 13 of them are child care centers and only 4 are family group homes. So one of the things that we're seeing that we want to work on is developing our family and group providers on the north side. When we look at star rating, and that becomes their part of that 1 through 5, there's 139 in Kalamazoo County, 92 in the city of Kalamazoo. So, and there's 50 childcare centers, and there's 42 family group providers here within Kalamazoo, city of Kalamazoo. So we really want to look at upgrading and getting more of them in the star rating program. And so that we can really work on one-on-one with a lot of these providers. Let me go to the next one. Well, another thing I wanted to look at just to tell you is about when we talked about cost, and we talked about it being hard. Crystal was talking about hard for families to be able to our centers and our homes to get people to work. It's also hard for our families to afford some of these. So if we go up on paying our child care providers, what are our families? And a lot of people don't want to put that cost off to our families. So just to go to a preschool, an average cost is $100 to $175 per week per child. Same with our infant toddlers, we're going up to $175 to $250 per week per child. So if you have multiple children, just look at what the cost of this looks like for a family. So we really need to look at that. But once again, as Krista was saying, it's hard to look at this cost when so many of us are out of work or families are trying to come in, parents, a single mother going back to work, and she has to pay $175 for one child, and then she has an infant toddler, she has to pay $250. So, you know, we're looking at almost $1,000 a month. And who brings home, you know, working at McDonald's or at to be able to afford childcare? So therefore, they're not there working. So we're looking at what we can do to help with this. The state is coming up with a couple of different grants that are going to be coming out in the next within the next month that's going to help hopefully offset some of this cost. It's still an issue that we need to be working with. So that is really the overview, quick and dirty overview of what Southwest Child Care Resource does. And we're here to even do more. And we're working with several different agencies to see how we can even increase this and help with our families and our child care providers. On to you, Krista.
Thanks, April. So real quick, and you know, since April is really focused and includes a lot of those childcare providers, KC Ready Fours is really just working with preschools. So the 3 and 4-year-olds in our county. And I just wanted to quickly introduce what it is that we do to support the sector. So you can think of our work in 3 main buckets. So the first thing is that we partner with, right now it's about 55 preschools in the county to provide high quality supports to those schools. So that's things like professional development, teacher mentors. We have speech language pathologists on staff who do those screens for children. That's the #1 reason kiddos are entering kindergarten with a special education plan, is those speech and language delays. So starting off some of that earlier is incredibly beneficial. We added occupational therapy. We have a behavior specialist. All of these sort of supports, if you think about sort of all the wraparound supports that are in the K-12 world that we bring down to the preschools, are provided to them at no cost. We also have tuition assistance for income eligible families. Like April was saying, childcare, preschool, that's the single largest line item on young families' budgets, right? It's more than their mortgage. It's more than other things that they are paying off. And it's an issue. So we are working to provide tuition assistance to income eligible families. And I'll show you some of those numbers shortly. And then we also know that 3 and 4-year-olds are a part of a family first, right? And so we offer other supports, often connecting them with other organizations in town to support the whole family. So that can be often things like food insecurity or housing insecurity. We do work with Michigan Works to help with employment skills and anything in between. So in terms of when I was looking at our Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo neighborhoods, we did a recent analysis in looking at our last 4 years of tuition assistance. So that was for those SPK neighborhoods, 442 children received about 1.3 million in tuition assistance in those last 4 years alone. That, again, we are a countywide organization, but that is about 41% of our tuition assistance over those last 4 years. And like we were saying earlier, in terms of how this is affecting on the ground with these folks, it is a huge challenge. I would say we are at unprecedented staffing shortages. This is putting directors in the classrooms, for example, which means that those jobs, right, they're leading of the programs, that's not happening necessarily because it has a trickle effect. They're hiring underqualified teachers. Their teachers aren't getting breaks. We had one person anecdotally say to us, like, I'm just looking for a warm body. So there's obviously quality implications in that, right? Because when we're putting underqualified or just sort of anyone in those roles, that takes a lot of support from our team, from April's teams and other folks in town to help stabilize the center and make sure that the children are getting what they need as the teachers are working towards their qualifications. It's really affecting employers. It's certainly affecting even my own team. The hours for care are limited. Classrooms are closing. There's wait lists, but they just cannot get enough folks to take the positions. So it is definitely an issue. And I know Nicole and Michael are going to talk a little bit about how they're supporting that in town, which is really exciting. Another thing that Casey Ready Fours has announced recently is our Thriving Teachers Initiative, which brings things like counseling, telemedicine, wellness resources, a crisis line to early educators in the county as a way to help invest in them as the current professionals or attract folks to the field. Because when we did an analysis, we found over 75% of our teachers that we were working with did not have access to health benefits, which when you're working through a pandemic, right, these aren't jobs that can be done remotely. This was an issue in terms of why folks were leaving the field. So this has been a really exciting way that we've started to support some of the educators in our county. I'm happy to open it up for questions, or if it's better to just pass it on to Michael and Nicole first and then open it up as a group, that's fine too.
Kevin, do you want questions now, or do you want us to wait until all of the presentations?
If it's fine with you all, let Michael and Nicole present, and we can just ask that way.
Mhm.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you all. Thanks all of you for the opportunity to talk about what we are doing together collaboratively in the Edison neighborhood. My name is Michael Evans. I'm Executive Director of the Kalamazoo Literacy Council, and I am with Nicole. Could you introduce yourself before we get started?
Sure can. Nicole Bloom, YWCA Kalamazoo. I'm a development manager there. I oversee the strategic focus area that is improving the lives of children.
Excellent. And we will share the work that we are working collaboratively with several partners in the Edison neighborhood to give you a neighborhood-based focus on this early childhood challenge that we have in our community. So the Edison Early Childhood Education Career Pathway really is part of the solution that you've heard some of the challenges about, and it's a very strong collaborative effort with many different agencies across the community. Nicole does a really good job of explaining why we started this, so I'll certainly let her start, but I know that from the Literacy Council's perspective, we were certainly seeing that many of our learners, they needed access to quality childcare, and working with partners such as Goodwill, which we send most of our learners to for GED, they certainly needed to have some additional support. So working in this at the neighborhood level is definitely a priority, and we're very glad to be able to present some of the solutions that are coming forth. Nicole.
Sure. And so the reason all of this began was, as you may know, YWCA expanded its early learning and childcare services into the neighborhood as part of the Creamery project. And we had about 30 full-time equivalent positions to fill. And one of the first pushbacks I got from my programmatic task force was, this is great, Nicole, how are you going to staff this? Because staffing shortages, especially in neighborhood-based care, isn't new. It's just exacerbated by the pandemic and is spread out into other programs, but we've been facing this for some time. And, you know, we just had an opportunity to think about a creative solution to how to address this issue that we've been dealing with for so long. And YWCA quickly realized that workforce development isn't our strength. And so we leaned into the community to find a partner who knew about adult learning and knew about workforce development. And we found that over at the Literacy Council with Michael Evans. So, right. So we're doing this work at the neighborhood level. This is at the intersection of education and equity. It is a very specific focus. It's not a broad focus at this time. We're working to solve a problem in this specific neighborhood. There's a lot of problems, as you heard from Kristen and April. We are definitely in a crisis situation. When we pull the birth data for the 49001 zip code, we find that there's 333 births to women living in that neighborhood every year. When you multiply that by children ages 0 to 5, you end up with 1,665 children between those ages. And based on licensed providers in that neighborhood, that was pulled from the Great Start to Quality system, there's only 16 at this time. So licensed providers in that neighborhood can only serve about 25% of the children living in that neighborhood. And it occurred to me when I saw this slide for the first time, we say that a double gap exists for families. But it occurred to me that that's also language that we use at YWCA around operations of childcare. There's a double gap there as well. So on the operations side, we can't charge enough to cover our costs of running a high quality center, especially for children and families living in crisis. But families also can't pay what it is we can charge, which is market rate. So families can't pay, we can't charge enough. That's kind of what puts us in this crisis situation from an operational standpoint. The double gap for families is that you can see from this data, there isn't enough childcare, and that even if for the childcare that is available, it's unaffordable without assistance. And the assistance system navigating that can be rocky at best. One other point that we pulled out from what's going on at the neighborhood level is that community members who are interested in starting home-based childcare, they might not be able to afford the upfront cost. So it kind of goes back to what does it cost to run high quality versus the revenue we're able to take in. So not only does that trip up people that are already running programs, but it just completely stops people dead in their tracks who might want to open up their own in-home.
So one of the things that was coming forth was we were really looking for steps toward a solution, utilizing this incredible new asset that had come into the Edison community. Now, for me, from an Edison resident, I live in this Edison neighborhood. I work in this neighborhood. My office is located at Goodwill Industries. And we were seeing this construction of this facility, which has housing in it. But I was hearing about this childcare that was also being offered. And when this became an opportunity, for me, I saw that this was definitely something that was changing what we could do for childcare. And we wanted to be able to be intentional partners to connect to this effort. And Nicole, she was the first that invited us to this effort, but it was really meant to make it so that there was a career pathway to help with filling the gap between those service providers who were looking for early learning professionals and the need in the community. The Edison Early Childhood Career Pathway has some components to it, and it's a collaborative effort that you'll hear more about later, but these were the things that we were hoping to blend together. One is we wanted to create a much more articulated career pathway and design a program where we can integrate our services to do that better. In other words, we wanted to recruit from the neighborhood to serve the neighborhood, as opposed to having job postings that may not be filled by people who understand the neighborhood, are from the neighborhood, and would benefit long-term from participating. Two, we wanted to make sure that if we are reaching into the neighborhood, that we were providing enough support so that they can be successful along that career pathway. And this was especially important if you're including people along the pathway who do not have credentials. That would include lack of GED, or they may be working on their English language or other lacks of credentials. And then third, we wanted to make sure that as this incredible asset was brought into the community, that it's not just about what happens inside the four walls of this building, it helps to be able to build neighborhood capacity. So looking more closely at the career pathway and program development, there are a lot of providers that are out there that are working to develop career pathways around early learning professionals. We were hoping to be able to align them better so that there would be a structured pathway for the people who we are engaging in this system. So in adult education, the adult education providers, just by their natural alignment, they work with workforce development to connect what's happening inside of adult ed programs to the available jobs that are out there. There was not a structured and specific pathway around early learning professionals that included this. That was our job, is to make sure that there was a clear pathway that aligned the workforce development, adult learning activities together. So thinking about it from a standpoint of what's in the Edison neighborhood, if you want to get a GED, you would go to the adult education and training program at Goodwill. If you needed some help with literacy, computer skills, or other types of literacy and language gaps, you would work with the Kalamazoo Literacy Council. And if you lack language fluency, we also have an ESL program. Connect that with the workforce development agency, such as Michigan Works, and Goodwill also has employment. Now you have the capability to start some of that work. If you're a younger employee or a younger learner, Youth Opportunities Unlimited does the exact same things. Well, we were having these conversations separately. This project brought us all together to say, can we take the existing workforce development programs, of which we work with Michigan Works and Goodwill with our jobs curriculum, and the existing adult learning programs, and make it so that they can intentionally support job seekers from the neighborhood in their pursuit of early learning professional careers. The second is the learners we're looking for. We want to make sure that they have the support necessary to be able to make it along this pathway. So it's, again, aligning some additional supports to be able to make sure that for those who are looking at this as a career and they're looking to possibly change what they're doing now to become an early learning professional, that they have the support needed to be able to make that leap. So for those who we're making, we wanted to make sure that they had the gainful employment, training, and supports that are necessary to lead to financial stability and economic opportunity. Chief among them is aligning it around the already available early childhood education apprenticeship that Southwest Child Care Resources have. So if you're making your way along this career path, not only are you getting supports to remove barriers to learning and barriers to employment, that's primarily provided by navigators and people who are trained with a really great navigation work group that we coordinate out of Goodwill Industries. Thanks, Kim Hollers, for doing that. But they also get some additional access while getting employment to this apprenticeship. So the YWCA made a very firm commitment that people that they wanted to invite in, if you didn't have your CDA, even if you didn't have a GED or you're working on English fluency, you can get paid a living wage at the start. And if you complete that process, you will be able to be employed at this site. Now, it's not just specific to YWCA. This idea is looking at it from a neighborhood perspective so that other sites will have the same type of mentality to be able to empower people and support them along their pathway to gainful employment. The third, and this is the part that excited me the most, and in fact, this was the reason why I said yes when Nicole asked for us to get involved, was, well, what can we do to be able to get the neighborhood involved? We know that in order to be able to support those who need the most help, you have to have connections in the neighborhood. And for those who we're serving, we wanted to make sure that they had access to a pathway that led to employment. But it was more than just employment. It's about what can you do with this new asset in our community. We were looking for ways to be able to bring this resource to support more families beyond what the Edison Childhood Children's Center would be, but also to look at the community to see what kind of multi-generational learning opportunities could happen. This is where there's a direct intersection with our work with Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo, with the Parent Literacy Together multi-generational learning project that's based out of Goodwill Industries with their Little Scholars Child Development Center, which is one of the new assets in the community joining the YWCA's Edison Children's Center. We looked at it from a standpoint of not just who's employing within these sites, but can we help entrepreneurial efforts and economic growth beyond this? So collectively, with the leadership of YWCA, Southwest Child Care Resources, we were doing the community connecting work with YOU, Goodwill Industries, Kalamazoo Promise, and now we've added El Concilio and several others. We were looking at a neighborhood-based solution to be able to truly change access to quality childcare in a way that we can see and feel in the neighborhood that I live and work in. So what did that look like? Nicole, she came up with this construct and we've been working on it ever since. So can you take us through it?
Yes, absolutely. So for the neighborhood capacity piece, I just want to add to, the broader concept and just highlighting it. The broader concept is that maybe we had a chance to figure this out within the YWCA because YWCA had an opportunity to bring on such a large group of individuals at one time. But ideally, this is a pool that other providers can draw from and other neighborhoods can learn from. Being a program director is so hard, and I will forever be advocating to make things easier for them so they can focus on quality program implementation. And if we can support that through staffing and supporting their staff, so it's not just on their shoulders, I think that is a real big win for our profession. So this is a visual that is representative of the structure we put together for the pilot of this work. So we started out just fundamentally knowing we need to work with a CBO, community-based organization that's embedded in the neighborhood, that is connected, knows their clients, knows the neighborhood well, and has supports in place. And it made the most sense to work with CBOs that are supporting adult learners because we were looking at bringing on non-traditional individuals into our space to be able to increase the amount of individuals we had to work with. And so Kalamazoo Literacy Council filled that role of the embedded community-based organization that is supporting adult learners around literacy and other items. The other thing that we knew we needed was a credentialing agency. And as Michael mentioned, as April mentioned in the prior presentation, Southwest Michigan Child Care Resources is doing this. They've got a credentialing program for the CDA. They have, I think it's one of the only pre-apprenticeships in early childhood in the nation. So they hold the Department of Labor contract on those, and those are nationally recognized apprenticeships that anybody can take with them wherever they go. And so we wanted to support what was already happening. And so that is the role that Child Care Resources plays. And in this space, YWCA Kalamazoo was acting as the employer. So we said as a commitment up front, before you get your GED, before you have English language fluency, before you earn your CDA, we're going to bring you on as an employee at a living wage, full-time work, full benefits. And we want you to come on at that time earning those things. And then we're going to support you along the way with our partners in getting, barrier removal, credentialing, whatever you need. Like, we're going to make that commitment up front. And also our commitment around creating an inclusive anti-bias work environment to disrupt systems, right? So that's the other thing, is that we created a space, or we continue every day to try to create a space where our staff are coming on knowing that they're not just childcare providers or daycare workers. They are early learning professionals, and they have the opportunity to make an impact in the neighborhoods that they live in through this work because they understand the importance of brain development and they understand how they're acting as an intervention into what some of these kiddos might be experiencing. We can't do this work alone, even with the three of us. So these are the partners that we had on board and continue to have on board to do this work. You can see they supported with recruitment. I'll just mention 45 individuals was our goal. We thought we had to recruit 45 to get 15 in hired. We had 102. So that's the next thing is like, what do we do with all of this? So it just spoke really loudly to us that, and this was during like peak pandemic too. So we didn't do the on the ground recruiting, any of that. It was just through alignment of partners and reaching out to our clients that we did this. So that was the start to it.
And this is what happened. I think you tell that story best. You were talking about the 45, but more than 100. I mean, and these were the people who showed up, and what was the response? I mean, you were the employer, so could you share that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So these numbers are great, but I think one of the things that motivates me in trying to continue to figure out how to do this work is the type of employee that we got to show up. It wasn't just about their position in a classroom or, you could see that they understood that what they were doing made a difference, that what they were doing mattered. It mattered to them. They show up every day, even when it's hard, to try to reimagine what childcare can look like for kiddos in the neighborhoods, what a staff looks like for programs in these neighborhoods. And I guess just going through the numbers, I think that number is actually up to 19 now. So originally we were going to bring on 15 individuals. We brought on 19 now. 16 began the CDA training with child care resources, and they're still doing that. 7 were Edison neighborhood residents. 2 needed to work on getting their GED. 2 were English language learners. 7 were Kalamazoo Promise eligible. We made referrals to our other CBO partners. JDI reached out, so this is expanding even beyond the Edison neighborhood. And 1 was hired by another CBO. So that was the first part of it. That was the pilot of all of this. And we were lucky enough to be able to move this into a phase 2, although I'll add, Michael and I were committed to moving this into phase 2, whether we got this funding or not. Like the momentum, we weren't going to let it stop. So, but we were awarded the Early Childhood Innovation Grant from ECIC in the amount of $300,000 to move this pilot into phase 2 sustainability.
And quickly on this initial cohort, when we were looking at it, the thing that intrigued me most is that if you were in the Edison neighborhood and you were that non-traditional learner, you actually had a competitive advantage in this process. You were wanted more than most when it comes to filling those positions. And so when there was this mass need for these early learning professionals, yes, we were able to meet it, but we were able to bring a substantial percentage of people from the neighborhood and those whose lives would be transformed the most once they were able to receive these positions. Some of the people who you see here, I know some of them personally, their stories are so inspiring, but you hear that they left something that they didn't like and joined something that they did love as a career while making their way along this career pathway. So the next step is we were committed to trying to make sure that this was sustainable over time, that we look for ways to be able to continue to promote it so that other providers would have the same commitment to hiring people at a living wage. I know our partnership with Goodwill Industries with the Little Scholars Child Development Center, the early learning professional that we have is at the same wage rate that these others are, with the expectation that we change what the expectation is for what you should expect to be paid as an early learning professional. And that's part of what we hope to be able to do in moving into the next phase of this project, which is this.
All right. So we love visuals around here. So that's what we got for phase 2. So phase 2 is moving the pilot from pilot to sustainability. We're still focused on the innovative approach to developing a workforce, and that is just keeping it neighborhood based, keeping every single thing we do neighborhood based. So we've broken our work into these 3 categories here. We're focusing our work around creating equitable neighborhood based support. So that does include some things that we talked about previously. So the full-time employment with living wages and benefits, it still focuses on that neighborhood recruitment, neighborhood specific recruitment. But you see something new here that we didn't mention before, and that is the Edison ECE University. And so what we mean by that is we are trying to find a way to integrate PD that's already accessible, but also finding gaps in PD as it stands and bring it down to the neighborhood level so that it can be delivered in a way that is meaningful to the individual and also supports them in applying the knowledge that they gain from that space. So it's not just about showing up for your PD, checking the box, getting your 24 hours, and it's not just for the program directors to make sure all of their staff are doing this. We are trying to make it meaningful and relevant to people's lives in the neighborhood. So that's not just professional, that's not just early learning professionals, that can be residents, that can be parents, it can be members of the university community, all coming together to learn together in the same space in innovative ways. That's what we're trying to figure out right now. So the other part of it is the intentional alignment of the CBOs. So we're continuing, you can see all of our partners along the bottom there. We're continuing to bring individuals in that can help with strategy development on all of this. And we've just started our Friday Awesome meetings again, is what we call our meetings on this work. So again, you'll see that we're trying to expand our early learning and childcare providers in the neighborhoods. That's not new. The gap identifications through strategic collaboration with CBOs, that's not new. But then you see this other bubble over here, and Michael, if you want to jump in about this, because you do a great job, is the inclusion of our neighborhood businesses as employers. And so Sakia, you mentioned something earlier about that, and I'm so glad you did, because that is part of the strategy here as well, is that, employers can get a benefit from, making sure their employees are taken care of, especially around childcare. And so how do we bring them into this conversation? Is one of the questions we're asking ourselves right now. Michael, do you want to jump in?
Oh, definitely. It's not just the employers who we know who live in the neighborhood, it's us as well. So when we were working with Goodwill Industries in partnership for the multi-generational project that's funded by SPK, our early learning support specialist needs to be included, and we need to look at it as an employer that we're doing our part. But what about the other businesses that live in this neighborhood? When I do my morning run, I run past FlowServe. I know people who work at FlowServe, more than likely they have childcare needs. Why should they leave the neighborhood, drive in the opposite direction, drop their child off at another childcare site if they could, to drive back into the neighborhood, instead of having access to the childcare providers that are within the neighborhood? So we're interested in developing more options within the neighborhood with the businesses' help. We will be holding a summit that invites some of those local businesses to at least give them an opportunity to express their need and express their interest, to connect their capacity to this particular effort. Right now, this is mostly community-based organizations, but we know that there are employers that have every capability of being able to join in if we show them what the impact of their participation is in. And we've, as nonprofits, we have worked with them and they've sponsored many of our activities. We don't want to look at them as sponsors for our fundraising activities, but partners in improving childcare at the neighborhood level, especially if they are within the neighborhood that we're talking about. So this was really intentionally meant to engage employers as partners and to expand opportunities and use those existing nonprofit organizations that are really leading the way in terms of models. What YWCA has done to employ early learning professionals with a living wage, what Goodwill is doing through this grant, and El Concilio will also be participating and having the same commitment. We want to make sure that everyone who's participating, they can understand the benefit of this particular effort. We believe that if you pay people well, they'll be retained longer, they'll be much more grateful. If they come from the neighborhood, they're going to have a lot likelihood of reducing the amount of absenteeism. I mean, I live in this neighborhood. I can walk to work. So can these many of these early learning professionals that we're recruiting from the neighborhood. So we see this as a way to make real impact that can be felt at an individual and neighborhood level if we work collectively to do it. I would also say a newer partner, but an expert voice that is very impressed with the work that we have is Dr. Eze at the LELNC. And she has really been impressed with this particular work and added her expertise as well. So we have every expectation that we can blend as much expertise to really be able to take this to fruition. And I think that that's pretty much the end of what we have at this point. We just hope that that does give you an idea of some of the work that is happening in the Edison neighborhood. Again, this doesn't work with just a few partners. Everyone you see listed along the bottom with the leading agencies, with YWCA and Southwest Child Care Resources in particular, they have helped to be able to bring enough capacity to do this well, and hopefully to be able to make a statistical difference when it comes to child care at the Edison neighborhood. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, SPK members, you have questions for these amazing people that are doing extraordinary work? I have a number, but I want to let you guys go. I'm going to try to get my view so I can see. There we go, gallery view. All right, Demero.
Yes, Ben Damero. Just as Bobby just said, thank you for all the great work that you're doing. This is a great presentation. I guess my biggest question is, what can we as an organizing committee do to support your work? And specifically, I'm thinking around the governor just announced there's going to be like $1,000 incentive bonus for hiring and retaining workers. Is that going to be enough to attract and retain workers, or is there more that could be done with like American Rescue Plan funding to supplement wages of early childhood workers? And I'm sorry, I do have a hard stop like right now, but I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say.
So be careful in how much you answer what we can do, because I think there's going to be a number of questions that come from everybody about that. So we want to hear that, but we also want to help you think about other things as well. But anyway, go ahead.
I'm not sure who wants to take that one, but I guess I'll start off in terms of the $1,000 funds coming down from the governor. What
Kristen,
we've
will
heard...
you say your name again? I didn't call you out. So
oh, sorry, Kristen Buell-Epistow. From in terms of what we've heard from our partners, it's no, it's not enough, but yes, it's a start, and yes, they feel at least recognized and seen. Which in a lot of the pandemic, when they've been essential but not recognized as essential, there was a lot of damage done there, right, in terms of feeling valued as a profession. So what we've heard is, yes, sounds great, that's a start, it's not enough. So I think continuing to keep this issue front and center for our community, and continuing to think of the ARPA funds that are coming as a way we invest in, you know, childcare, youth development in particular. I mean, Ben, as you know, like there's sort of multiplier effects when you invest in childcare professions and those jobs first. So I think we have to keep that front and center.
And to build on to what Chris was saying, one of the things that a lot of our providers, especially our family and home providers, they need.
April, will you give your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, April Goodwin, Child Care Resources, is building on to, they have a desire to open up a child care program, but it's the funding to be able to get the program up and running. That's where a lot of it, you know, there's those barriers there, the cost of the application, the cost of the environmental testing, the cost of, you know, getting your place up to par. And those type of things is where a lot of our family and home groups have an issue with trying to get going. Then once they get going, now we get onto the having to hire and the cost of hiring and the cost of keeping, especially in your family and group homes. So our biggest start is getting the ability to knock that barrier down of how much it costs to open up an actual childcare programming.
This is Michael Evans from Kalamazoo Literacy Council. I look at this from a very pragmatic perspective. With Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo, with all of the expertise and resources that you have, what we're looking for is how do we build this in a sustainable fashion using all of the existing revenue streams, including what we have locally, state, federal, and coming up with a way that we can look at this over the long term, as opposed to applying for competitively, and we were successful in getting a grant to be able to expand it. But I think that that's just too sporadic and risky. So if we have some partners at the city that can help us to really build a strong sustainability strategy that has some reliability, that can help us to scale activities like this up, that's much better than the next grant or relying on $1,000 that already isn't enough. So that's what part of our work is to look for those. We'd love to work in partnership with you to do that.
Nicole Bloom, YWCA. So one real quick thing I want to say is also that that money is going to be allocated for centers that were open prior to March 21st of 2021. So anybody that's been licensed since then won't have access to those funds. And it's also for licensed providers only. So anybody who's unlicensed won't have access to those funds. So very direct, how could you help? There might be a huge gap there that needs some support.
I was unmuting, but Bobby, you were on mute. Were you?
Sorry, Bobby Hopewell, just looking for more questions.
Okay, I'm gonna shoot mine.
I see. Sakia, go ahead, Sakili.
Okay, thank you. So one, I just want to say thank you again to everybody for the presentation. And it's so exciting to see the collaboration. When SPK first came around, we did have 5 early childhood proposals come in. And they were a bit disjointed. And so I think when we think about how can we help, understanding the collaborations that are going on and where there are gaps is very helpful. My question is, I know April, you lifted up, I believe it was 22 childcare centers on the north side, and we had the breakdown there. Nicole and Michael, you talked a little bit about Edison with Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo covering north side, east side, Edison. And I know, Kristen, you mentioned the areas. Can somebody give us like a further breakdown later? You don't have to go through the numbers now, but can somebody give us a further breakdown, like per neighborhood of what exists for us to better understand the landscape? Because often when we have these conversations, we leave out the east side. And I know Brenda, I know you're gonna go there. So we see what's there for the north side. We know what's going on in Edison. We are here to serve north side, east side, Edison. So I just wanna make sure that we see what's going on with those babies and families there, because Michael, like you said, we don't want people to have to drive in this direction and that direction. And if something is really not there, that's also helpful for us to know.
And yes, I can give you all that breakdown. Actually, I thought about putting and breaking it down and giving you the Edison and east side, but it was just was said north side, so I kind of set it at that right there. But I can get you that.
Awesome, April. Yeah, it was awesome. I just know where my colleagues were gonna go.
I know, and on all 3 of those neighborhoods we need to look at. So yes, I can get you that information. I can get you that information either today or tomorrow. I've got it sitting in my and just need to break it out a little bit more by exactly those zip codes. But yes, I will get that to you.
Thank you.
Brenda Hughes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sakia, because that's exactly where I was going, wanting to see the statistics from the east side. And back it up on the early fours proposal that we funded, that originally was supposed to be to add 3-year-olds to the east, from the east side to a child care. And I know there was some problems with the provider, but I still want to know what we're going to do with the east side and for the east side. I raised my son's 36 years old, and 36 years old, I had the same problem that we're talking about now. And I only had one child, but I couldn't afford childcare, and there was none on the east side. So yeah, that was exactly where I was going. And I would really like to see a plan, or if there is any plans or suggestions of where to go next for the east side. But thank you. Everything, Edison looks great, and everybody is working hard, and I appreciate it.
This is Bobby Hopewell. Dr. Oliver, you're up.
What processes are in, well, first of all, again, thank you all again. I echo the sentiments of the committee. What processes are in place to help those who are not at the 3, 4, 5 level of quality for them to reach that level? So the leveling up of those who are already in existence in the tiered system.
In the tier system, my staff works every day with going out and calling upon these providers. We work with helping them to develop some different curriculum. We work with the state, like for the family and group homes. The state is now coming out with a family and group home business classes, courses that will help them in reaching some of those different levels. Once again, the only thing probably about the state, and we've complained as far as resource centers about the star rating, is that a lot of when they say get up to that 4 and 5, you have to be able to afford some of those higher curriculums. Those are $2,000 and $3,000 curriculum programming that there is nothing out there really to help with that cost. So therefore, they only get up to the three level. And that doesn't mean they're any better or any worse, because I've got some 5s that I would have put down at a 1. And I've got some 2s that I'd have said, you know, you've got everything it takes except for maybe that one thing that should have been rated at a 5-star level. So, but a lot of it is some of our parents who are opening up their homes, they don't have a bachelor's degree. That's what it's supposed to be at the level of a 5-star or a 4-star. So therefore, that's one of the things that we're doing with our developing our CDA apprenticeship, is to help them with getting some of those credentials to bring them up to some of those higher levels.
And I'll add Nicole Bloom, YWCA. I'll add that at the neighborhood level, Dr. Eze and Early Learning Neighborhood Collaborative is forming an Early Learning Neighborhood Collaborative Kalamazoo. And YWCA is a part of that. The Northside Preschools, Pre-K International, and El Concilio is a part of that. And we are coming together to just be able to talk about what is needed at the neighborhood level. And so that has been very helpful as a provider in that way.
All right, again, this is Bobby Hopewell. Alyssa Stewart, you are next.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, presenters, as well. We're excited to have you all here. Couple quick questions. One is around, it might feel tangential, but I feel like it's going to be important to name in this space, which I wanted to check in on what you all are seeing as far as gender identity of the folks being fed into these pipeline programs. So I'm curious with the applicants for Nicole, your project, for example, like, did you see good gender identity diversity? Because one thing I'm struck by is the historical context of gendered roles like childcare being valued less than maybe roles that are more male gendered. And so I'm curious about, and then there's also the dynamic of folks who go into care roles also potentially needing care. And so another kind of double gap potentially for folks. So I'm curious of whether in your group of applicants, did you see folks who identified as male? I just feel like that's a huge gap. I mean, speaking for myself, my children's childcare is entirely female as far as their caretakers, and it's just a notable piece. So can anyone speak to that dynamic?
Yeah,
Before you do that, this is Bobby Hopewell. Alyssa, did you have another question too?
Yeah, thank you.
Why don't you front load your questions, and then those that are answering the questions, because of our timing, I'm going to ask you to shrink it as best you can. Please condense. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bobby. Yeah, the second was, I think April touched on it slightly, but I was curious about what her and her team saw as the biggest barriers. I think you named a few, but I was just curious if there are any others. The biggest barriers for folks trying to progress through that rating. I maybe feel like I maybe heard you say, April, that I'm curious if by your assessment, the star rating is an equitable assessment tool, or whether it's maybe fundamentally flawed. I'm mindful that it ties to how resources are provided. And so I'm just curious of your assessment of whether that is a solid, equitable tool that we should be reinforcing, or whether it needs to be examined as a tool that we use to think about quality and resources.
I can just go quick first. Nicole Bloom, YWCA. So I guess to sum it up, what I would say, Alyssa, is thank you for lifting it up, and thank you for noticing it as another double gap. They're piling up here in this conversation, goodness. But what I would say is, yes, we did see diversity amongst gender identity. And it wasn't at first. It was interesting as the program went along, and it's like as voices got activated and people were telling people that we saw more a diverse gender come into our space. And I think what it's about is creating space where people feel safe to engage in whatever's happening there. And, it might be pretty scary for, let's say, a male to come into a space that's historically around, women. And as we've gone on, we've seen that gender diversification. I just think it's about being focused on creating space where people can feel safe no matter how they identify.
This is Michael Evans at Kalamazoo Literacy Council. One of the things that we did identify is that if you identify as male, and maybe we need to have a support group for you. The early learning support specialist that's at the Little Scholars Child Development Center that was hired through Goodwill. We started off with male, but we think that we really did look at this differently and support people who want to do this regardless of who they are, but recognize that there may be different types of supports based off of who you are. So that's one of the things we're looking at, is maybe we need to have some support groups that are added to this to be able to help build resiliency and build a sense of community where you feel like you belong, as opposed to I'm the only one, why am I here?
April, did you want to dive in?
Yes. For one, I got so caught up on what Michael was stating. The first part is I wanted to also state that we have not seen a whole lot of males. We have seen a few, and as we come along in our search, also going through our CDA program, it's not having very many males going through it. Diversity wise, still that is another thing. We're not seeing of the African American and other coming into the programming. That's one of the things we really need to look at, is building those different ethnic groups up so we see those faces for our children to see faces other than of themselves. The other part of your question, Alyssa, would you just briefly capture that for me?
Yeah, yep. So Alyssa Stewart, it was really just, I guess I'm curious at a high level, systemically, we think about the star rating. Would you assess that to be, and I'm going to put you on the spot because I feel like it's a big part of what you do. I'm curious whether you would say that is an equitable assessment system, or whether you think there are improvements that could be made.
Again, I'm April Goodwin, Child Care Resources. Yes, it's a state program. We have talked many times about that. We feel that it's not equitable. It's not really should be, because of the different types of things that they look at. It's something that I think the state is looking at. They're looking at what other types of way can we do this rating, but it's not something that they're just jumping right on right away. But yes, it is something that needs to be looked at, because I don't feel it is as fair as it should be when it comes to centers versus family and home groups within the state.
Ms. Bobby Hopewell, again, thank you, April, for that. Mr. Pulley, you're up. Jonathan Pulley.
Hello. Thank you all so much for such an impactful and wonderful presentation. And when I think about this past year, thinking about essential workers, this is the type of work that kind of comes front in mind. So thank you all for your work during this time. This question might be geared more towards Michael and Nicole. As you all are sort of like embarking on phase 2, I kind of liked how you said, regardless of whether you're going to get funding or not, like we need to see sort of that long-term sustainability portion of this. The only question I had was, do you all feel like you have enough learning and to be able to share to our priority areas of Edison, North Side and East Side, that would actually help sort of begin this process across a more broad scale? And when you think about that sustainability, was that considered in the larger, Kalamazoo County?
We're going to have to, this is Nicole Bloom, YWCA. Michael and I are going to have to tag team this one, but I'll start. So we've already started sharing, YWCA does work with BBZ in the North Side and, works through ELNC with Pre-K International located on the East Side. And so we've been sharing across the state. We've been sharing as much as we can, but also one of the things that we want to say is that this is what we keep repeating to everybody is this isn't going to be a copy paste situation. This was developed specifically for the Edison neighborhood. It is specific for that neighborhood. So if there's one thing that we want everybody to know when we are sharing is, I guess, just keep that in mind and base it around what that specific neighborhood is going to need, and that it might look different a little, or it might look different a lot. But I think it's the collaborative spirit and the approaches that we hope everybody can pick up on.
This is Michael Evans, Kalamazoo Literacy Council. Building on what Nicole said, it's more than being different by neighborhood. There are some characteristics that we say early when we talk to others about how to share this work. You really need to have collaborations that are true, that are long-term, and that are committed. If that's not the case, then it will take a grant in order to get people's attention as opposed to mission-driven interests. In our case, we were looking for partners that had mission-driven interests. We went a little bit further. We actually have a memorandum of understanding that codifies what every partner is willing to do for this over the long term. And it also lists what are the barriers that would keep you from being present as an ongoing and committed partner in this. Those from a budget standpoint were included in the grant. It has been, and it is, we are documenting along the way to make sure that we know what works, what doesn't. We are pretty transparent about good, bad, and ugly. And we have every expectation that as we go along further, that we can pass that along so that others, if they want to scale up or take this type of approach differently, that they don't have to start from square one. The final thing I will say is that we protect the culture of this conversation on purpose. Nicole, she alluded to this meeting that we call Friday Awesome. These are our weekly planning meetings. We work intentionally to make sure that there's a positive and optimistic way of seeing this as opposed to a limiting perspective. And if Friday Awesome doesn't work, we won't even have a meeting. We'll just cancel it and say, we need to make sure that we have a culture that says we can do it. Let's figure out how to do it with or without funds, so that we can make progress. So those are some of the things we're hoping to export. Some of it may transfer to other neighborhoods, but I think if you were to boil it down to the common characteristics, strong, committed collaboration that is willing to do this over time, that is mission driven as opposed to grant driven.
Thank you so much.
This is Bobby Hopewell again. Are there other questions from members like Carol McGlynn?
Actually, it's probably more of a comment than a question, because it seems like all of my colleagues who've asked the questions that that have come to mind so far. But I do really appreciate the collaboration, because you can really tell that this is a true collaboration, and that the partners are really working towards one goal. But I do think there is a huge opportunity here with our business community. And I think that really needs to be pressed, because it is a situation now that it's a need for that community too. So this isn't out of the goodness of their heart. This is, they need this to happen. And so focusing on that piece is really, and maybe that's something that we as a body could work towards too, with that. So appreciate the work. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how the ins and outs were, but obviously time doesn't really enable us to do that. But it really seems like a great framework and something that the community can really build on. So I appreciate it.
Other questions from the team? So I have a couple, and I'm going to do two of mine that I think can be answered short and sweet. And then I'm going to mention 3 or 4 things that Nicole and Michael, I'd like to get more information on. And again, this is Bobby Hopewell, chair of SPK. One, what was the rate of pay that these workers are getting at YW now at the center?
There's a pay range between $13 an hour all the way up to $20 an hour. And there's a pay increase built in when they earn their credential. And there is off-shift premiums involved in that as well.
Is there, so I assume some of these folks that work at the center need childcare themselves. Is there a connectivity between them being able to work there and them receiving some type of benefit in their childcare?
Yes, Nicole Bloom, YWCA. So we know at YWCA, our staff are our clients, especially when we're recruiting from the neighborhood. And so the same services and supports that we provide to our clients, we provide to our staff as well. And so prioritizing childcare for them is number one for us. Just a real quick anecdote, as an example, during COVID, we added out of school time programming so that our YWCA staff could continue to provide services to the community.
Awesome. Again, Bobby Hopewell, and these are just things that you don't need to answer now, but things I'd like to get a little bit more connectivity with you on that maybe in some ways I'd kind of like to help with if possible, but I know you always like to hear people say they're willing to help. One is the employer side, as Kara McGlynn had mentioned. To me, I'm sitting here thinking about employer matches. If we put out a challenge sort of match thing, just want to throw that out there. Thought that there may be an opportunity to think of some of this as a managed service of YWCA and building entrepreneurial infrastructure. And I'll explain when we get to talk at some point what I mean by that. The other thing was entrepreneurial nature of this. And then churches, how involved. I know Brenda talked about the East Side. When I grew up on the East Side, there used to be a childcare center at the church at Phelps in East Maine, some kind of childcare center. I think my mom even dropped me off there on a short-term stay or something like that, or short-term stay. I sound like I'm in the hospital. Anyway, yeah, you can be there for 2 minutes, little Bobby. Would love to know, to think about, put that in our heads, to think about those structures that we have in existence. You think about the East Side, we don't have as many public structures, but we do have a number of churches. We have St. Mary's, we have other things over there as well. And then this one you don't need to tell me now either. Have we learned a little bit from the families that we are caring for their children, whether it's at this center or other centers, where those folks work? So as we're starting to think about employers, if we know where our folks are working and we have 12 people that are working at FlowServe or whatever, that's an opportunity to target FlowServe. So those are the things that I'd love, Michael, maybe next week or something, and Nicole, we can have a sidebar conversation or a cup of coffee or whatever. Would love to dive into that with you. And again, I'd love to see if I can help at all on this. I got to stop offering to help. I do have to remember I have a job, but.
And Bobby, this is April Goodwin. I like to be on that conversation because I have been working. I have worked with, talked to FlowServe. I've talked to like the Radisson about this particular type of thing where we get them to match, getting them to work with bringing in some of their employees to have child care program that will work with them. I just was recently contacted by a senior location with had not senior adults who was looking for someone to help with their employees who needed child care. And so they were wanting to know how we could possibly be matching up with this. So the opportunity is there, and we are interested in pulling that together so that we can help with employers. So yes, we are also out there looking at this too.
Yeah, sorry, April, didn't mean to leave you out.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that I jumped in there so I can have, put my little 2 cents in there. So.
No.
This is Michael Evans, Kalamazoo Literacy Council, and my final comment, because April and Nicole and I, we need to have a meeting with the Innovation Fund to talk about that $300,000 grant. I will say that entrepreneurship and business connections as part of phase 2. So if you want to help us to be able to make that connection more intentionally, work with April, Nicole, myself, and others, we certainly would appreciate that. We oftentimes have these conversations and it feels like nonprofits talking to nonprofits instead of businesses talking with us. So we really want to make sure that it's a genuine conversation that brings businesses that are invested and need this effort on the long term. So thank you.
All right, Bobby Hopewell again. Any other questions, folks? Well, thank you all for being with us today. We have a lot to chew on, and we've learned a heck of a lot, and we look forward to staying connected and seeing where we can support. All right, moving on. Unfinished business.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Mr. Ford, unfinished business.
All right. The set aside update. So if you all recall, it was roughly 64,000 set aside when we awarded the grants to the recent cohort as well. And it was divided up equally amongst the subcommittee. 3 areas were customized support for the cohort. So support beyond the check, addressing urgent needs, and then a narrative piece. And so Sakia and myself are part of a group, and now John Oliver, I think he may have gotten off. But we come up with what we think is an exciting and innovative way to kind of utilize that. And we want to connect with youth. I know that's one of our focus areas, but we've been kind of weak in connecting with youth. And so we want to structure that urgent community needs piece around a one-time mini grant structure. We want to get 3 youth from each of our core neighborhoods to serve on a committee to help us develop like what those urgent needs would be, help us create an RFP, provide them stipends for that work as well, in addition to doing a narrative piece around poverty and prosperity. And I want Sakia to chime in if that's a decent overview, anything else she wants to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's a decent overview. And I just want to say we want to start with, when we say 3 youth total for the committee, but when it comes to the narrative change, to include more youth, because we know we can't end up with like 15 youth and only 4 adults to decide how the mini grants go. But that sums it up. I always say nothing about us without us. I can't wait to hear what the youth say that they would like to see in their core neighborhoods, especially coming off a year of a pandemic and with all of the gun violence in the community and things like that. So that summed it up really well. The other thing I just would say in terms of timeline, we're trying to move very quickly to engage the youth and get some things in place by the end of the year. So we're not saying 6 months from now, this is what we want to do with the set aside. So this Friday, we will be having the next meeting to try to get some things in place. And I would say by the end of October, hopefully have identified the youth and can continue to go from there.
So this is Bobby Hopewell. Brenda, before we dive into this one, because we will go on for a long time, I guess, Kevin, when we have something like this, I think we need something tangible to look at, because then it might alleviate some of the questions that will end up into a 25-minute conversation. I think if we could, folks, let's use this as an introduction to an idea that they will provide more information a little later, and maybe an actual request. And if we could just tailor it that way and let it go forward from there, rather than diving too deep today. I don't mean to cut anybody off. Certainly you can ask whatever you want. I'm just trying to get us down the road. So I'll leave it at that. Ms. Hughes?
You can also reach out to me after the meeting as well.
It's really quick. Brenda Hughes, it's really quick. Since Sakia said she hoped to identify the youth by the end of October, which is now, I just wanted to know how those youth are being recruited. I mean, are we supposed to help? Are you doing it on your own? That's all. It's happening in 3 weeks. I just want to know how it's happening.
You want to answer that, Sakia?
Yeah, we're gonna find out on Friday, Brenda, but we'll certainly send you also an email with some plan, with the plan. But it will be like, it's not gonna be just us deciding that. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Anything else under unfinished business, Mr. Ford? This is Bobby Hopewell.
No.
All right. Again, this is Bobby Hopewell. We are at miscellaneous. Is there miscellaneous? I know that at the executive level, we talked about some type of advance at some point in time. We don't have anything planned or anything like that. So we'll try to have more information at the next meeting to talk about when we can really get honed in on 2022. Some opportunities to talk maybe more boldly. What I liked about the conversation today was doing something that has immediate impact and looking at how you sustain it, and knowing that I'm hoping with data it will show that these folks have gotten into the workforce, so that 2 generations, we got our kids covered, safe, warm, helping, learning environment, and allowing our parents to get out there and raise the wealth, the payroll that they need to support their families. So that's what I loved about today. And these are the conversations and the work that we need to be about, I think, more aggressively. So anyway, that's me. Any other miscellaneous? All right. Do we have any public comments?
All right, Bobby, this is Alyssa Stewart. I do have one quick update. I just wanted to highlight it because it's a collaboration between United Way, Kalamazoo Community Foundation, and the city. On September 20th, some resources were invested in United Way, some of the American Rescue Plan dollars, 1.1 million. The process for the distribution of those funds was made public on Friday. So I wanted to make sure to state that here publicly with this group, that there is a grant process for those funds to be distributed. You can learn more by going to changethestory.org. And at the very top, there's a banner that says Kalamazoo Funding Opportunity. It gives all the details about how to pursue those federal funds. They are focused in the priority areas of economy, housing, and youth. So very much in alignment with all of our work here through SPK. And the SPK neighborhoods are also qualified census tracts for these federal funds. And so they'll be prioritized for these American Rescue Plan funds that we are helping administer. So just want to make sure everyone was aware that is a transparent and open process.
And these are the city ARP funds or ARP funds or whatever they're called. Okay.
Correct. Yep. So it is 1.1 million of the city's many millions in ARP funds. Yep.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Any other miscellaneous? Any public comment?
There are no public comments at this time.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. With that, we are adjourned.
All right. Take care.